Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy. So it seems to me that now more than ever, retailers really have to assert themselves in the customer experience. Retailers have to create a differentiated customer experience that's going to make people want to go there rather than go someplace else. And as I always like to say, this means you've got to prove you're loyal to the customer as opposed to trying to find ways to bribe the customer into being loyal to you. And I think that if retailers don't, grab these opportunities, if they don't embrace these opportunities, they're really missing the boat. And I think they're opening the door for somebody else to take their customers. Now, there were two stories I read recently about different industries that made me sort of think about this. The first one was in the New York Times. And basically what it said was that there are some hotels out there that have decided that they're going to take a page from some of the airlines books. And they're going to find ways to levy fees on the people who are staying in their hotels as much as they possibly can to build up profitability. In fact, there was a study done, and basically what it said was that hotels in the United States this year are expected to tack on $2.55 billion in excess fees this year that had never been levied before. And that's more than at any time since they started keeping track of these things back in 2000, more than in 16 years. Now, one of the things that the hotels are starting to levy fees on, for example, are free coffee in your room. Now, listen, I travel a lot, right? And one of the things I love is the availability of a coffee machine, K-cup, whatever, or a little coffee pot in my room. So early in the morning when I get up to do morning newsbeat, or late at night if I'm trying to stay up to do morning newsbeat, I can have myself a cup of coffee. It's never great coffee, but it's usually pretty good, and it's enough to kind of keep the blood flowing. But what hotels have figured out is they've figured out if they can wire these machines into the computer system, they can actually charge $2 or $3 for that cup of coffee. So if you have 2 or 3 cups of coffee, it's going to be, $9 or whatever it's going to be. And this strikes me as crazy. I mean, this is sure, it's a fee they can levy, but does it make sense to levy it? It's the old Jurassic Park thing, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. It just seems to me that a cup of coffee can't cost that much. So all you're going to do is alienate the person who's staying in the room, especially if that person has been staying there for a number of times, has been fairly loyal to your chain. I know from my point of view, if I started running into a chain, and I don't stay in like really expensive hotels, but if I started running into a chain that started charging me for a cup of coffee in the room, I think I'd probably try and look elsewhere. I'd try and avoid that chain if I could. Now, recently I had exactly the opposite experience at the Acme Hotel in Chicago. They didn't have a coffee pot in the room, but they would deliver, if you asked for it, at the time you asked for it, a thermos of hot coffee to your room every morning, and they didn't charge for it. And I thought, wow, that's a great service. And it's a way of differentiating yourself in the market. It just seems to me, listen, can companies do things to make things more expensive for consumers? Sure. But doing things like that, finding ways to levy fees and finding ways to make a profit in a way that's only going to alienate consumers is not a very smart thing to do, and it doesn't serve the brand in the long run. Now, the other example, also a Time story, was about American Airlines. And in this case, I think American Airlines is quite frankly missing the boat. You'll excuse the pun. Because basically what American Airlines has done is launched a new advertising campaign, basically suggesting that it's really, if flyers want to have a good experience on American Airlines, they really have to take some responsibility for it. And one of the things they do, and let me make sure I get this right, the ad says they would really, really appreciate it if you would ask before raising the window shade, and if you'd not hog the armrest, and also be nice to the flight attendants when they greet you. And basically the ad campaign takes the position that we are responsible for the quality of flight. Not so much American Airlines. I mean, they're responsible getting it up and getting it down safely and getting you where you want to be. But aside from that, the experience is really our responsibility. Now listen, I fly a lot. I've flown well over 2 million miles in my career, which is not bad, okay? It's not George Clooney up in the air territory, but 2 million miles in a career is not that bad. And I try and be a friendly guy when I get on an airplane. I try and be friendly to the flight attendants and the crew. I try to be nice to the people sitting next to me. I only put my bag in the luggage compartment above my seat. And boy, does that make me crazy if I'm in row 12 and some idiot from row 33 decides to put his bag up above me. It's like, give me a break. That's not the way things are supposed to be done. That stuff really annoys me. But generally, I try to be pleasant to everybody. I try not to hug the armrest. I try to be a good guy. Now, if I were not a good guy on the airplane, I don't think any amount of advertising, it would tell me that I really have to change the way I behave. But as it is, the advertising telling me that it's my responsibility and not theirs, all that does is alienate me. All it does is say, listen, they really don't want to take responsibility for making it a good customer service experience. Again, I just don't think it makes sense. I think you have to embrace the opportunities. I have to think you find the opportunities where you can make a difference, where you can prove to the customer that you are loyal to the customer, as opposed to saying, it's really all on you. Those are the moments where you can differentiate yourself. Those are the moments where you can actually say to the customer, we want to do business with you, and we'd really appreciate it if you would do business with us. You kind of find those moments and embrace them. You can't try and slough them off or do things that are going to alienate the customer. Again, you got to prove to the customer you're loyal to them. And this goes, I think, for every customer-facing experience, whether we're talking about hotels, whether we're talking about airlines, or we're talking about food retail or any other kind of retail. Grab the moment. Don't try and make it somebody else's responsibility. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this Thursday morning. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.